The sky over Titan Station was blacker than sin. Even the stars looked like they were holding their breath. Captain Warren stood by the comms panel, blood on his collar, dust in his lungs. Half the bridge crew was dead. The other half, well, they weren't far behind. They'd come without warning. The Zalari. Not a message, not a broadcast, not even a scan. Just a hyperspace breach that tore open the fabric of Saturn's orbit like paper. And then the fire began. One blast hit the primary generator. Another punched through the habitation ring. No war declaration, no political leverage. Just slaughter, like they were cleaning up an infestation. But humanity wasn't some soft-bellied colony species. We bled. We adapted. We bit back. And now Warren had one job left before this floating coffin went dark. Send the final message. His hand trembled as he typed. Not from fear. From fury. He remembered his daughter's last message from Earth, her laughing, holding up a birthday drawing she made for him. It was still playing on the auxiliary screen, glitching with static and smoke. He keyed in the priority command. No encryption. He wanted them to hear it clear. Loud. A lieutenant staggered toward him, half her face burned, whispering, "Sir, the core's overheating. 15 minutes. Tops." "Good," he said, cracking his knuckles. "We only need 10. He stared into the broadcast camera, eyes like sharpened ice. His voice was low, measured, final. "This is Captain Travis Warren, Titan Defense Fleet. You declared war on Earth without cause. You murdered civilians, children. You thought we'd beg." He leaned closer. "You thought wrong. You declared war. Now we'll show you why that was a mistake." He hit send. Then he pulled the hardline chip from the core, a direct upload to command back home. Earth would get it. They'd see the wreckage, and they'd answer, and when they did, the Zalari wouldn't be ready. 3 days later, on Earth's surface, that message blared across every military outpost, every orbital station, every classified black site. It didn't matter where they were. They all stopped what they were doing. Pilots grounded. Engineers froze mid-circuit. Marines, hardened killers with kill counts in the hundreds, stared in silence. Some cried, quietly. Others just clenched fists so hard their knuckles bled. Then came the response. Not a diplomatic message, not a counter-threat. Just 3 words. Operation Hellwake approved, and humanity got to work. The man leading the counteroffensive was Commander Thorne. A quiet brute from the deep mines of Europa, one of those guys who only spoke when it mattered, and when he did, people listened. He watched Warren's last message on loop, and each time, his jaw locked harder. "Tell R&D I want Chimera units unshackled," he growled. "No restrictions." "But sir, they're not—" "Do it." Across the solar system, hidden labs unsealed their darkest projects, things humanity had sworn they'd never use, not unless they had no choice. Now they had a reason. Thorne walked through Hangar 9, where the first batch of Revenant exo-soldiers were being pulled from cryo, genetically fused with neural AI, half machine, half forgotten human. These weren't soldiers. They were payback in armor. He looked into the eyes of the first one that opened. "Sir," it said, voice rasping like gravel, "we're ready to burn the stars." Thorne nodded. "Good, because it's time we reminded the galaxy what we are." Meanwhile, far beyond Pluto, the Zalari mothership intercepted Warren's message. Their warlord watched it. He laughed. "Emotion," he said to his generals, "always their weakness." But he didn't understand. For humans, emotion wasn't weakness. It was fuel, and now it was war. The Zalari didn't understand what they'd done. Not yet. To them, humanity was just another noisy species crawling over a blue rock, barely worth conquering. Soft, divided, emotional, weak. They saw our chaos and mistook it for confusion, our debates and flaws as signs of collapse. But they didn't see what humanity became when it was cornered, when it was angry, when it remembered how to kill. The final message from Titan was still fresh, still echoing in the bones of Earth's military command when the first counteroffensive plans began. Not speeches, not negotiation, just names, targets, launch codes. Commander Thorne stood over the operations table in Black Site Alpha, 2 kilometers below Iceland's southern glacier wall. A low rumble vibrated the reinforced steel beneath his boots, the awakening of machines long thought too dangerous to activate. He tapped the digital interface, and dozens of crimson points lit up the holographic star map. Each one a known Zalari outpost, mothership, or supply lane. Hundreds more would be mapped soon, but they'd start with one. Strike first, Varnex Relay Station, Deep Space Communications Node, lightly guarded, crucial to Zalari long-range navigation. Wipe it, and they'd be flying blind in their own territory. Thorne turned to the squad standing in full gear behind him. Black armor, no insignia, no names, just numbers burned into their chest plates. The Revenant Unit. Man-made monsters. Biologically enhanced. Cybernetically bound to AI neural cores. Each one had died in war once, declared KIA, then harvested, rebuilt, reprogrammed. They didn't feel fear anymore, just mission clarity, just vengeance. Load up, Thorne growled. Leave nothing breathing. The Revenant dropship, call sign Hellwake OE1, tore through silent space like a bullet. Inside, the atmosphere was tense, almost quiet. No chatter, no psych-up speeches, just low breathing and gear checks. Unit Ojensen sat across from Unit 12, his eyes like chipped stone. First live up, Zo9 muttered. 12 didn't look up. Doesn't matter, they hit first, that's all that matters. Odo9 nodded. There wasn't much left of the man he used to be, just fragments of memories, disconnected images. But he remembered fire. He remembered pain. He remembered his son's scream during the last Zalari raid on Europa City. And now he remembered why he fought. The breach was silent. No cinematic explosion, no alarms, just a surgical entry. Nanocutters slicing through hull seams like butter. A hiss of pressure, then boots on alloy. The Zalari never even knew what hit them. Revenants moved like shadows, each one synced to battlefield data in real time. Their HUDs painted every enemy with crimson outlines. Zalari soldiers, 8 feet tall, exoskeletal armor, 4-limbed, were taken down in seconds. Unit 07 lobbed a compressed grav core into a communications room. The chamber folded inward, crushing 5 Zalari under the weight of their own tech. Screams. Silence. Unit 11 stabbed a quantum blade through a command drone's thorax, twisting it until the body collapsed like wet paper. Within 17 minutes, the entire station was cleared. No survivors, no messages out. Hellwake 01 exfiltrated before the core charges went off. From a distance, the Varnex relay looked like a sun-going nova, one bright, angry flash that lit up the edge of the galaxy. The first blow had landed. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Thorne stood before the Global War Council, a round table of generals, scientists, and tactical AI analysts. The room was dark. The only light came from the flickering feed of the burning relay. Confirmation, a voice said over the comlink. Varnex is gone. No pings, no transmissions. Murmurs rippled through the room. Good, Thorne said, his voice cold. Let's make it clear to the Zalari. Every star they took from us will return in ashes. In a remote corner of deep space, on board the Zalari command vessel, Nex Karun, Warlord Eshrak watched the destruction feed with narrowed eyes. He did not laugh this time. They wiped the relay, hissed his second-in-command. "Completely. It wasn't orbital fire. It was infiltration. Surgical." Eshrak's mandibles clicked, his spines bristling. "We underestimated them. They're not like the others we've conquered," the officer added. "They fight like they were made for war." "They were forged in it," Eshrak muttered, almost to himself. "And they remember every flame." He turned to his command crew. "Increase all planetary garrisons, mobilize our second fleet, and locate Earth's primary military base. They'll defend it. Let them try." Back at Black Site Alpha, Thorne watched the footage from the body cams of the Revenants. It wasn't just warfare. It was precision vengeance. He wasn't a man prone to emotion, but he clenched his fists until the leather of his gloves creaked. The Zalari thought they had dominance because of ships, numbers, and cold ruthlessness. What they didn't understand was that humanity thrives in the dirt. We come from fire and claw. Every war in our history made us meaner, smarter, more dangerous. They had machines. We had rage. Thorne opened a secure channel. "Initiate Phase 2. Phase 2 was brutal. Not flashy, not loud. They hit resource lines, food synthesis plants, hatchery stations. No civilian targets, no war crimes, just precision decimation of every infrastructure node the Zalari needed to function. Within a week, 18 Zalari supply sectors went dark. Their outer colonies began starving. Their internal command started fracturing. And worst of all, for the first time in Zalari history, they began doubting. Somewhere in the back-end systems of Earth's orbital defense grid, a young operator named Keegan watched the incoming transmission logs. One came in from a Zalari recon unit, heavily scrambled, weak signal. He leaned in, heart racing. The translation came in slowly, piece by piece. "This is Unit 6 of Zalari Scouting Detachment, requesting emergency evac. We encountered human forces, not normal soldiers. They move without fear. They see us before we see them. They're hunting us." Keegan blinked. He forwarded the clip to Thorne. And for the first time in days, Thorne let a small, brutal smile crack across his face. But victory was never clean. It always cost something. The Revenants weren't gods. They bled, they burned, they died. Unit 04, the oldest of the current batch, a man once known as Riker, was vaporized during the blackout run on the Drask array. His body didn't even have time to register the heat. Unit 10 lost half his neural capacity in an EMP trap. They had to ice him permanently, better than letting the feedback fry the others through the hive link. Each loss hit hard. Not because they cried about it. Revenants didn't cry, but Thorne counted the dead. Every time. And for each fallen soldier, he ordered another Zalari sector erased. But the enemy was adapting too. Warlord Eshrak, now furious, began authorizing bioexperiments never before tested on his own kind, splicing hybrid soldiers, synthetic berserkers, suicidal quantum detonators that could destroy entire moon bases with a single touch. He called them Eaters of Fire. They didn't speak. They didn't sleep. Just rage given form. And he was planning to unleash them on Earth's soil. He wasn't aiming for victory anymore. He wanted extinction. Back on Earth, as the war escalated, the people began to feel the cost. Cities like Montreal, Kyoto, Johannesburg, they all began rebuilding their bunkers. Food was rationed. Every able-bodied person trained. Kids watched vids of Titan's last message in schools, not for history, but motivation. The final words of Captain Warren became a holy chant. "You declared war. Now we'll show you why that was a mistake." It was etched into buildings, spray-painted onto helmets, whispered before drops. And still. Earth was preparing for the final blow. A message was being drafted, a second broadcast, not a plea, a promise. This one would go out after the next major strike. The attack on the Zalari homeworld moon, Vashtorun. It was sacred to them. Cultural, ancient, untouched by war for over 1,000 years. That would end in 6 days. The Revenants were already prepping. New drop pods, better heat shielding, a full AI-run orbital assist to coordinate. And at the heart of it all was Commander Thorn, silent, steel-eyed, and waiting. He stared out the window of Black Site Alpha, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, someone had decided humanity was a mistake worth erasing. They were about to learn that mistakes come with consequences. The stars above Vashtorun shimmered with an unnatural glow. The moon itself spun like a slow, cursed jewel, ancient, untouched, revered by the Zalari as a cradle of life, a birthplace of their civilization. For over 1,000 years, not a single weapon had been fired on its surface. Not even the Zalari dared to stain it with war. But humans, we didn't care about their temples. We didn't care what they held sacred. They burned ours first. In the black void just outside sensor range, Hellwake Fleet 3 floated in silence. No lights, no comms. Even the ion trails were minimized. It was a full strike group. 2 carriers, 4 cruisers, a stealth destroyer, and 32 drop pods. Each packed with something that would make the Zalari weep, revenants. Commander Thorn stood on the command deck of the lead carrier, HWS Iron Rain, his eyes locked on the moon's surface via high-orbit scan. "Surface defenses?" he asked. The fleet AI replied, smooth and cold. "Minimal. Ceremonial guards only. Vashtorun is not expected to be attacked." "They'll learn," Thorn muttered. Behind him, Captain Renner, one of the last non-enhanced human officers cleared for Black Ops Command, shifted uncomfortably. "Still seems wrong, hitting their holy moon." Thorn didn't look at him. "They didn't hesitate to glass Titan. Don't confuse mercy with morality." Renner said nothing more. Inside drop pod 07, Unit 09 gripped the side rails. His breath hissed through his respirator, fogging the small viewport in front of him. The Revenants weren't nervous. They didn't freeze. But they remembered. He remembered the Europa colony fires. He remembered his son, torn apart in the evacuation stampede. He remembered the smell of ash and blood. They wanted war. They were about to get something worse. "Confirmed trajectory?" the dropcom crackled. "Planetfall in 2 minutes." The pods detached silently, gliding into gravity wells like reapers. One by one, 32 coffins of vengeance screamed through Vashtorun's skies, burning bright and fast. The sacred moon had no defense against what came next. The pods hit the surface with bone-shattering force, plowing into ancient stone plazas, shrines, and ceremonial towers. Statues of Zalari gods cracked and tumbled, their faces shattered beneath metal boots. Unit 09 kicked open his hatch and stepped out into the dust-choked air. No resistance yet, just silence. The kind that meant something important was about to die. HUDs lit up, paths mapped, targets confirmed. "Fan out, full perimeter sweep," barked Unit 03. Within minutes, the Revenants stormed through Vashtorun's temples like wolves through a graveyard. The first Zalari guards didn't even get a shot off. They weren't soldiers. They were relics, priests, guardians of history, and history burns just as easy as flesh. One Revenant, Unit 12, paused near a monument. It was carved from obsidian, taller than a 10-story building, covered in alien scripture. At the base, a Zalari child clutched the feet of a dying elder, a sculpture meant to represent the sacrifice of generations. He looked at it for a second longer than he should have. Unit 03 noticed. "You freezing up?" 12 didn't respond, but in the next moment, he planted an overcharged plasma charge at the base and walked away. The explosion tore through the sacred shrine, throwing dust and shrapnel into the air. Statues of ancient heroes collapsed like broken toys. "Not freezing," he muttered, Just aiming. Back on the Iron Rain, Thorn watched the video feed with steel-cold detachment. "The Zalari won't let this slide," the fleet AI commented. "This was sacred to them." "I'm counting on it," Thorn said. Renner frowned. "You want them angry?" "I want them emotional, reckless. The more sacred ground we burn, the more they'll overreach. They'll pour ships into this sector to defend Ashes, while we gut their core systems." He looked at the star map. War's not about honor. It's about breaking your enemy's spine while they're kneeling to pick up the pieces. On the surface, the Revenants breached the final sanctum, a subterranean vault said to house the original genetic archive of the Zalari race. Unit 09 stared at the massive egg-shaped structure. It pulsed with blue energy, living tech. He approached, weapons raised, but no one fired. No alarms, just silence. Inside the chamber, one Zalari remained. An elder. Old, frail, covered in ceremonial implants and ancient metal bindings. He didn't flinch when Unit 09 leveled his weapon. Instead, he spoke in broken Terran standard. "You don't belong here. This place was never meant for violence." 09 didn't move. "You glassed Titan." The elder's eyes dimmed. "I did not. I begged them not to. I told them humanity was different, that you had fire." "Yeah, you were right," 09 said. And then he pulled the trigger. 12 minutes later, the core of the sanctum detonated. Blue fire spilled out of the cracks in the moon's crust as the original Zalari DNA archive turned to gas and static. From orbit, the sensors recorded seismic activity spiking across the entire southern hemisphere. And in the distance, from the next Karun, Warlord Eshrak watched it all. His mandibles trembled. Not in fear, in rage. "They desecrate our history," he snarled. "They're animals." A junior officer stepped forward, voice shaking. "They're not stopping. Reports are coming in. Half our mid-rim colonies are dark. They're disabling every relay, every supply line." Eshrak's claws clenched so hard they cracked the control panel. "Then we respond in kind. Send the Eaters of Fire." The officer paled. "But they haven't been tested in planetary. I don't care." Eshrak stood tall, eyes glowing with hatred. "We'll turn Earth into a cinder. We will drown their skies with ash. And when they weep for mercy, we will erase their name from the stars." On Earth, Commander Thorn received the warning from deep space scouts. The Eaters of Fire were coming. Only whispers had existed before now. Rumors. But the scans confirmed it. Massive bioorganic warships, pulsing with unstable fusion signatures, heading towards the Sol system at impossible speeds. "They're going to try and finish us," the fleet AI said quietly. Thorn didn't flinch. "They won't get the chance." He opened a secure line to all Black Ops facilities. "Wake the Hound Protocol." In a cryovault buried deep beneath the Antarctic ice, something stirred. Buried since the last Earth civil conflict, something even the Revenants couldn't fully control. He was older than the others, meaner, built not to infiltrate, but to eradicate. The tank hissed open. A man, or what was left of one, stepped forward, skin laced with titanium mesh, bones reinforced with carbon alloy, neural AI burned directly into his cortex. No number, no name, just a call sign, Hound. As the Revenants exfiltrated from Vash Torin, Unit 09 paused before climbing into the evac shuttle. He turned, staring at the burning ruins behind him. The temples, the shrines, the smoke climbing into orbit. He didn't feel victory. He didn't feel pride. He just felt a quiet certainty. They had made their point. The Zalari started this war thinking humans were just noisy parasites. Now they knew. We're not parasites. We're predators. And when pushed far enough, we don't stop. We erase. The transport carrying Hound didn't have windows. No one on board needed to see space. They weren't tourists. They were predators, hunters. Commander Thorne stood in the reinforced observation chamber, separated from the asset by 3 inches of layered impact glass, magnetic dampeners, and a containment field that hummed with warning-level energy. Inside the sealed bay, Hound sat alone. No restraints, no chains, just stillness. He was fully conscious, stripped to the bare minimum, combat harness, neural jack hardwired into his spine, eyes like molten iron cooled into something worse. "Hound," Thorne said through the comm. "You understand the target?" The man didn't respond immediately. His head tilted slightly, like he was listening to something distant, or maybe remembering something no one else ever should. Then he spoke, voice low, cold. "You want them dead?" "No," Thorne replied. "I want them broken. I want the last of them to wish they'd never crawled out of their spawning chambers. I want their warlords sobbing in ash." Hound's lips curled into something that looked like a smile. "Then drop me first." The Eaters of Fire arrived on the edge of the Sol system 30 hours later. 6 of them, each the size of a small moon. Their hulls weren't metal. They were grown, alive, bleeding atmosphere from the cracks in their armored skins. They pulsed with radioactive light, emitting constant screeches of organic radar so intense that unshielded human vessels were going blind before visual contact. Each carried thousands of biotroopers, fused, mutated, Zalari bred for one thing: destruction. And they were headed straight for Earth. The panic among the outer colonies hit first. Civilian transports begged for evacuation clearance. Stations near Neptune and Uranus powered down, trying to hide in the cold. But Earth didn't hide. Earth was ready. The war room at Blacksite Alpha was running hot. Commanders barked orders across 6 continents. Orbital cannons were powered to max output. A dozen defense satellites repositioned over high-risk targets. But none of it centered the plan. Not really. Because this battle wasn't about fleets, it was about Hound. Thorne stood at the center of it all, silent, hands folded behind his back. The screen in front of him showed the Eaters of Fire drifting through the Kuiper Belt like tumors, unstoppable, beautiful in a terrifying, apocalyptic way. Renner approached him, holding a tablet. "All units are green. Revenants are locked in drop pods. Railguns primed. Are we seriously dropping him in alone?" Thorne didn't look away from the screen. "He's not alone," he said. "They just haven't died yet." Above Pluto, the iron rain dropped out of stealth. Its hangar bay doors opened. The pod carrying Hound launched with a thunderous hiss. No escort, no backup. Just one man in a tungsten coffin. Headed toward the lead Eater of Fire, designate Seraph Gore. As Hound's pod screamed through the void, the bioship's outer shell reacted. Dozens of organic tentacle turrets erupted from its surface, screeching, pulsing with antimatter blasts. They fired wildly. The pod juked, dived, burned atmosphere, and then impact. Hound's pod didn't land. It burrowed, right through the bioskin, right into the heart of the beast. Inside the Eater, it was chaos. The air wasn't breathable. It was thick with spores and plasma smoke. The walls were living tissue. The floor pulsed like a heartbeat. Hound stepped out, blade already extended, pulse rifle humming. Immediately, the first wave of biotroopers surged toward him, mutated Zalari beasts with fused limbs, chitin armor, and screaming mouths in places no mouth should exist. Hound didn't hesitate. He moved like the laws of physics didn't apply. Fast, brutal, efficient, blade through the first, gunfire through the next 5. He grabbed the 7th by its throat and drove it into the wall until it became part of it. The corridors of Seraph Gore turned into a slaughterhouse. He didn't stop, didn't speak, didn't even seem alive, just motion and death. The Eater tried to adapt, rerouting walls to collapse on him, releasing neurotoxin clouds, swarming him with acidic bloodhounds. But Hound's suit neutralized every attack before it landed. Worse, he learned, his neural AI mapped every structural weakness on the fly, marking vital organs, fuel sacs, nerve clusters. 10 minutes into the breach, he triggered the first rupture. A chain reaction of explosions rippled through the beast's spine. It screamed, an actual noise, audible across space. And then it began to die, from the inside out. On the bridge of Nex Karun, Warlord Eshrak stared at the feed in disbelief. "What is that?" he hissed. The sensor tech scrambled to respond. "It's just one life sign, but it's consuming internal sectors like a virus. We can't kill it." Eshrak smashed the console with a clawed fist. "Then bring the rest forward, all of them. If Earth wants total war, we'll give it to them." The 5 remaining Eaters changed trajectory. Straight for Earth. But it was too late. One by one, the other Revenant strike teams were already in motion. Unit 09 dropped into Eater 2, blowing its neural core and ejecting seconds before its hull imploded. Unit 12 led a 3-man infiltration through Eater 3, planting anti-grav charges at the heart of its propulsion system. Units 804 and 11 didn't make it out. They never planned to. One of them stayed behind in Eater 4's reproductive chamber, rupturing its biofuel sacs with a thermal lance. He died laughing. Another wrapped himself in high-yield det cord and threw himself into the central brain of Eater 5. By the time the remaining ships reached Earth orbit, only one Eater was still functional, Eater 6, and it was limping, half of its organic systems offline. And it was bleeding. Real blood. A biological planet killer, leaking red like any other animal. From Earth's orbit, the entire world watched. Billions of screens tuned in. The images were burned into history. 6 nightmares from another species' hell, reduced to carcasses, and one twitching, dying beast scraping at the upper atmosphere like a moth in flame. It was trying to turn around, to flee. But Earth wasn't done yet. From the clouds above the Pacific, the orbital cannon, Judgment 1, rotated to face the sky. Authorization keys entered, power surge detected. Commander Thorne stood by the final trigger. "Message?" the AI asked. He thought of Titan, of Warren, of the millions that died when the Zalari first attacked, of every mistake they made. He looked straight at the broadcast feed and said, "This is for Titan," and fired. A beam of solar-charged plasma carved through the sky like God's sword. It punched through the Eater's chest, burned out its core, and kept going. When it was over, there was nothing left. No debris, no scream. Just silence. Back on the Iron Rain, Hound stood alone in the aftermath of Seraph Gore's destruction. His armor was cracked, his left arm barely responding, but he was alive. He looked up at the stars, breathing in through broken filters. A comm pinged. Thorne's voice. "Status?" "They're dead," Hound said. "All of them." "Good. Come home." But Hound didn't respond. He looked at the distant points of light in the sky, the same stars the Zalari had come from, and he said, "Not yet." Then he turned toward the escape pod, dragging his blade behind him like it owed him something. The galaxy had gone silent. It took 6 hours for the signals to reach the far sectors. Data fragments, garbled sensor footage, intercepted death screams across encrypted Zalari channels. One by one, outer empires, fringe species, even Earth's old enemies began to realize the truth. The Eaters of Fire were gone, not defeated, erased, killed by a species they had labeled weak, undisciplined, primitive. Now the silence echoed across stars that had never heard Earth's name before, and suddenly everyone knew it. On Earth, there was no celebration, No parades, no songs, no medals. Commander Thorne stood on the upper balcony of Black Site Alpha, watching the southern horizon crack with lightning as a storm rolled across the ice flats. The air tasted of metal and ozone, like the war had infected the weather. Behind him, the war room buzzed quietly, analysts tracking Zalari fleet movements, diplomats fielding encrypted messages from alien governments now interested in peace. But none of it mattered. Not to Thorne, because Hound hadn't returned. Not yet. The last signal from him was short. 30 seconds of comms burst as he entered the derelict escape pod after destroying Seraph Gore. "I'm not coming back. Not yet. There's something else out here. Something following the Zalari. I can feel it." That was 4 days ago. The escape pod's beacon had never activated, and Thorne had a sick feeling in his gut that this war wasn't over. In orbit, inside the salvage cruiser Long Wake, a 3-man recon team drifted through the remains of Seraph Gore. It wasn't salvage. Not really. It was autopsy. Commander Rusk, grizzled, one-eyed, chewing dried caffeine tabs like candy, stood with his boots buried in layers of burned Zalari tissue, holding a scanner that wouldn't stop glitching. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. The readings made no sense. The creature's internals were wrong. Not just biologically engineered, rewritten, scarred, altered post-birth. "Sir," one of the techs called, "we found something." They led Rusk to what looked like a nerve chamber. At the center, a symbol had been branded into the tissue wall. Not Zalari, not human. Circular, angular, alien even by alien standards. The scanner didn't recognize it. Rusk stared at it a long time. "It's not theirs," he muttered. "It's older." "Think Hound saw this?" the tech asked. Rusk didn't answer. Back on Earth, Thorne met with the Joint Strategic Council, a small group of Earth's highest-ranking defense minds and AI systems. It was a cold, windowless chamber deep under the Atlantic. One of the elder generals, skin sagging with age and stress, looked up from the transmission logs. "We've confirmed something," he said. Thorne leaned forward. "Go on." 2 months before the Zalari attacked Titan, they sent a fleet out system. Massive displacement, top-tier assets. Then they went silent. No response, no trace. Where? Toward a region we've never mapped. Deep space, too far to be economic. No known colonies. Thorne's jaw tightened. So they weren't running from us. They were running from something else. The general nodded slowly. Whatever they met out there, it terrified them so much. They attacked us to secure the Sol system, not to conquer it, to use it as a shield. Thorne sat back. Silence filled the room like a funeral dirge. "They weren't the threat," he said finally. "They were the warning. Far beyond the rim, deeper than human tech was ever meant to reach, Hound drifted through cold space. He was alone in the escape pod, systems shut down to avoid detection. His body ran on emergency stims, his neural AI in low-power mode. He should have turned back. He didn't, because something was calling him, not in words, not in transmissions, but through something deeper, an instinct, a pull, like whatever was out here knew what he was, and wanted him closer. The pod drifted toward a black object in space, not a ship, not a planet, a structure, geometrically perfect, no light, no heat signature, just there, impossible, ancient, as if the universe had forgotten it. And in his mind, Hound heard a sound, not a voice, not language, but meaning. You are not them, you are worse. You are what comes after. You are evolution by force. He stared out the viewport. His hands gripped the controls, and for the first time since his resurrection, he felt fear. Back home, Earth's skies had changed. The orbital scars from the Eater attack were still visible. Cities had floodlights aimed at the stars, like they expected another invasion every second. Children were born in bunkers. Elderly refused to leave shelters. But humanity didn't break. We sharpened. Factories shifted into wartime output again. Military recruitment surged. Black Ops programs tripled their funding. Civilian AI researchers were conscripted into defense AI training labs. Earth was learning fast, because now the question wasn't, did we survive? It was, what's coming next? Commander Thorne sat alone in his quarters, watching the original message from Captain Warren one more time. "You declared war. Now we'll show you why that was a mistake." Those words had become scripture, but now they felt like a prelude, not an ending. A knock at the door. It slid open. Renner stepped in, pale-faced, holding a new report. "You need to see this." Thorne scanned the page, stopped, looked up, voice flat. "What is this?" "We decrypted fragments of a Zolari emergency database from the relay station we hit last month," Renner said. "Turns out there was a class of signals they were intercepting from deep space." "What kind of signals?" Renner swallowed hard. "They weren't directed at them. They were trying to block them, jam them." He tapped the page. The decrypted phrase lit the screen. "The Ascended are watching." Back aboard the drifting structure, Hound stood outside the escape pod now, sealed in a hard shell suit. He approached the black monolith of alien design. As he touched its surface, it rippled, not with light, but with memory. He saw flashes, a world collapsing into itself, creatures screaming in languages the universe had forgotten, stars being harvested like fruit, and humans, hundreds of years in the future, fighting something they couldn't comprehend. The images burned into his mind. Then one final message pulsed through his neural jack. "You are ours now." And the door opened. On Earth, all contact with Hound's beacon ceased. Total blackout. Not dead, not traceable, just gone. But Thorne didn't panic. He stood before the Joint Command Board and said what no one else could. "He's not dead. They found him, and he'll be back." A pause. Different. The first sign of them wasn't ships. It wasn't weapons. It wasn't even a declaration. It was silence. The kind of silence that eats sound instead of holding it. Satellites around Jupiter went dark at the same instant, their feeds frozen mid-transmission. Mars' orbital defense picked up a ripple across space-time, like gravity had stuttered. Deep space telescopes in the Kuiper Belt returned with static instead of stars. And then came the dream reports. Men and women across Earth woke screaming the same words. "The Ascended are watching." Commander Thorne didn't sleep anymore. He stood in the war room of Black Site Alpha, jaw tight. Eyes locked on the board filled with unanswered questions. The Zolari weren't finished, but they'd gone quiet, pulling back, licking wounds. That in itself was terrifying. A species that never retreated now avoided direct engagement. Because they knew. They'd seen it before. Thorne leaned over the map. Hundreds of red marks glared back at him, each one a dead station, a lost colony, a silenced probe. Renner entered quietly, 2 mugs of stim coffee in hand. He set one down near Thorne. "You've been at this table for 20 hours. Thorne didn't look up. "Hours don't matter anymore. You're burning yourself out." Thorne finally glanced at him, eyes like steel ground on stone. "I'll burn when Earth's safe, not before." Renner wanted to argue. Instead, he swallowed and asked the question no one wanted answered. "What happens if Hound doesn't come back?" Thorne didn't hesitate. "He will, but not as the man we dropped." Somewhere far beyond mapped space, Hound was walking. The black structure wasn't a ship. Not exactly. It was a tomb, a prison, a cathedral. Inside, the walls pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't a heartbeat. The floor was smooth, Carved, geometric, too perfect, too intentional. And the voices? They weren't whispers in his head. They were commands. Step forward. Abandon flesh. We have chosen you. Every instinct screamed to resist, but the neural AI in his cortex shuddered, glitched, answered them. The Ascended weren't asking. They were rewiring him, thread by thread. Back on Earth, reports piled in. A listening post on Europa detected a spike in radio bands older than human tech could register. It wasn't language. It was pattern. Pure math, repeating, recursive, infinite. A military AI tried to decode it. It burned itself out in 90 seconds, screaming binary until its processors fried. On Titan's remains, salvage crews stumbled upon something frozen in the wreckage. Not Zalari. Not human. A shard. Black. Cold. A piece of something larger. One worker touched it. His veins turned black within minutes. His eyes went white. Before they could quarantine him, he whispered the same phrase Warren had once broadcast into the void. "You declared war. Now we'll show you why that was a mistake." Then he died smiling. Thorne studied the footage. His knuckles turned white against the console. "This isn't invasion," he muttered. "This is infection." Renner shifted beside him. "What the hell are we fighting, sir?" Thorne finally said it aloud. "Not the Zalari. Not anymore." He tapped the black shard's scan results. "We're fighting their gods." Meanwhile, in the ashes of Zalari territory, Warlord Eshrak convened his shattered council. Half his generals were gone, his fleets gutted, his empire humiliated. He wanted revenge. But something colder ran through his veins now. Fear. "The humans lit the fire," one of his advisors hissed. "We should have crushed them faster." Eshrak shook his head. "No, they burned us because we hesitated, because we were distracted." He raised a claw and pointed to the holomap. "The Ascended are awake." Silence fell. Even hardened warlords lowered their heads. "They will come for us all," Eshrak continued. "And the humans will be their first weapon." In deep space, Hound collapsed to his knees. The structure was inside him now, or he was inside it. He saw visions, Earth cities, but older, ruined, consumed by something vast. He saw his own hands tearing through enemies like paper, except they weren't Zalari. They weren't even alien. They were human, and the voices grew louder. "We gave fire to your ancestors. We guided your wars. Every step you take toward us." Hound gritted his teeth, blood running from his nose. "I am human," he spat. The response wasn't words, it was laughter, cold, infinite, layered in 1,000 dead tongues. Not anymore. On Earth, the revenants began breaking down. Unit 09 woke from stasis with his neural core screaming. He smashed 3 walls before they subdued him. His HUD kept flashing symbols that matched the shard from Titan. Unit 12 went silent during a mission, staring at the sky until his heart stopped. Others reported hearing voices during downtime, dreams that weren't theirs. Renner found Thorne staring at their medical charts. "They're infected, aren't they?" Renner asked quietly. Thorne nodded once. "They're not soldiers anymore. They're beacons." The panic spread fast. Civilian sectors whispered that Earth had awoken something worse than the Zalari. Conspiracy forums called it the God War. Even military officers questioned it. If humanity had killed the Eaters of Fire, why was Earth still preparing defenses like nothing had changed? Thorne answered them with one line. Because the Eaters weren't the end. They were the prologue. In the shadows of Black Site Alpha, Thorne received a secure message. Not human, not Zalari. Translated, it read, "We have seen the same symbols. You are not alone, but you are not ready. It was unsigned. No source trace, no origin, but Thorne recognized desperation when he saw it. There were others out there, other species who had fought the Ascended before, and they had lost. Back inside the Black Cathedral, Hound reached the heart. It wasn't a machine. It wasn't alive. It was a mirror. When he looked, he didn't see his reflection. He saw what the Ascended wanted him to become. A human no longer bound by flesh, a predator sharpened into infinity, a god-killer, and beneath it all, a single truth written in light. Humanity was not chosen to survive. Humanity was chosen to destroy. Hound clenched his fists. His voice was raw, broken, but defiant. I don't belong to you. The structure pulsed, shaking. Ancient walls groaning. Then you will belong to nothing. And it began remaking him. On Earth, every revenant collapsed at the same hour, screaming, convulsing. Their neural cores flared white-hot, then went dead. Medical staff scrambled, panicked, systems fried. And through every revenant's mouth came the same broadcast, spoken in unison across continents. We are awake. The world froze. Billions heard it. The Ascended had announced themselves, and humanity realized the Zalari War was just the first mistake. The world didn't breathe for 3 days. Every revenant across Earth lay cold in their containment tanks, neural cores fried, bodies twitching with ghost signals. Civilians demanded answers. Soldiers whispered rumors. Priests said the end had arrived. The phrase repeated across every channel. We are awake. No one knew what it meant. Not fully. But they felt it. The kind of dread that curled into the bones. Commander Thorne stood before the United Global Command, a council of broken, exhausted men and women who now ruled by fear more than politics. They wanted explanations. Thorne didn't give them comfort. They've infected our soldiers, he said flatly. The revenants are compromised. Hound is missing. The Zalari are scattered but not gone. And now we face something that doesn't want territory. It doesn't want resources. It wants submission. The counselors shifted nervously. One finally asked, "What are they?" Thorne's jaw flexed. Predators, not of planets but of civilizations. They strip them down, rewrite them, and they leave nothing behind but ruins. Murmurs broke out. Another counselor leaned forward, voice sharp. So we negotiate. We've survived before by bending, by adapting. Thorne's eyes went cold. You don't negotiate with fire. You put it out, or it burns everything. Across the galaxy, the Zalari Empire reeled. Warlord Eshrak sat alone in the war chamber of Nex Karun, surrounded by silence. His generals were dead. His empire fractured. His gods, revealed to be nothing more than the monsters that birthed them. He slammed a clawed fist into the table. They've awakened the Ascended, he growled. The humans, the cursed humans. But even as he said it, he knew the truth. The humans hadn't awakened them. The Ascended had always been waiting, and humanity was simply the first species brutal enough to answer back. Back on Earth, chaos festered. Protests in New York, riots in New Delhi, suicide cults forming in the ruins of Johannesburg. Everywhere, the message spread. The Ascended are awake. Humanity is doomed. But for every collapse, there was also rage. Old enemies laid down grudges. Russian and American war fleets docked side by side. African freehold militias volunteered for off-world campaigns. Even rogue states signed pacts, all under one banner, human command. Because despair and fear were luxuries. And Thorne knew there was only one path left. War. The revenants began to change. Medical teams tried to dissect their neural cores, to figure out what the Ascended had left behind. But every attempt failed. Systems fried. Surgeons suffered seizures. AI monitors broke. Then Unit So-9 woke up. He sat upright in his containment tank, eyes glowing faint white. The techs panicked. Guns were raised. But he didn't attack. He simply looked straight into the security camera and spoke. "He's coming." "Who?" Thorne demanded, watching from the control deck. Unit So-9 smiled. "Not human. Not alien. Something between. Hound." Deep beyond the rim, Hound was walking again. But he wasn't alone. The Black Cathedral had remade him. His body was heavier, denser, skin laced with ascended alloy, neural AI rewritten to something more. And around him walked shadows. Not Zalari, not human, not even alive. Echoes of civilizations long dead burned into the Ascended's will, warriors of light and bone, their faces erased, their movements perfect. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Hound felt them in his mind. Soldiers who had once resisted, who had once sworn to fight, and had been bent instead into eternal servitude. But he wasn't like them. Not yet. He clenched his fists until his knuckles split. Blood dripped black and red. The voices pressed harder. "You belong to us!" But another voice pushed back, Captain Warren's words, the last message. "You declared war. Now we'll show you why that was a mistake." Hound roared against the silence, and the shadows flinched. On Earth, Thorne began to plan the unthinkable. "Contact the Zalari," he ordered. The war room froze. Renner looked at him like he'd gone insane. "You want to ally with them, after everything?" Thorne didn't blink. "If the Ascended consume us, they consume them too. They're predators of civilizations, not species. If humanity dies, the Zalari are next. If the Zalari die, we follow." Renner shook his head. "They'll never agree. Too much blood spilled." "They'll agree," Thorne said grimly, "because fear makes allies faster than diplomacy." Warlord Eshrak nearly killed the messenger when the offer came through. "Humans!" he spat. "They butchered Vashtoran! They burned our shrines!" But his surviving advisors pressed him. "They also killed the Eaters of Fire. They wounded what we could not." Eshrak hissed, mandibles clattering. Pride burned in his chest. Hatred boiled in his veins. But deeper than both was the truth he couldn't deny. The Ascended were awake, and his people would not survive without the humans. He slammed his claws against the war table. "Summon their commander." 2 weeks later, in orbit above neutral ground, a shattered asteroid between Earth and Zalari space, Commander Thorne and Warlord Ishrak met for the first time. Neither bowed, neither looked away. They simply stared, two predators circling the same prey. "You killed my world," Eshrak growled. "You glassed Titan," Thorne answered coldly. Silence stretched, thick as blood. Then Thorne said, "The Ascended don't care who started this. They'll end us both, unless we end them first." Eshrak leaned forward, spines rising. "You think your fragile species can end what created stars?" Thorne's voice was steel. "We don't need to end them. We just need to bleed them." The first human Zalari War Council was chaos. Generals screamed. Scientists fought. Translators struggled. But slowly, painfully, a plan began to form. The Ascended weren't infinite. They weren't gods. They were parasites, feeding on civilizations until they collapsed. If humanity and the Zalari combined fleets, combined weapons, combined soldiers, maybe they could wound them. Maybe enough to survive. It wasn't victory they sought. It was survival. But survival has a cost. And Hound was already walking back toward them. Changed, altered, ascended. The first proof that humanity itself could be bent into a weapon. And when he returned, it wouldn't be as their soldier. It would be as their executioner. On the eve of the new war, Thorne stood alone on the balcony of Black Site Alpha, staring at the storm-choked horizon. He thought of Warren, of Titan, of the billions who had died since. He thought of Hound, the weapon they unleashed, the man who might not be a man anymore. And he whispered into the night, to no one but the storm. You wanted war. You wanted fire. Now you'll see what happens when humanity burns with it. The sky over Earth was no longer blue. It was black, veined with light that wasn't lightning but fractures in reality itself. The Ascended weren't approaching in ships. They weren't invading with armies. They were arriving. Like a disease that seeped into existence. Orbit shook with storms of static. Defense satellites blinded. Space itself shivered. And through it all, the same phrase burned in every mind, every transmission, every scream. We are awake. Commander Thorne stood on the command deck of the HWS Iron Rain, staring at the rippling void beyond Mars. Around him floated the remnants of Earth's fleets, battered carriers, scarred destroyers, civilian ships retrofitted with cannons. Beside them, for the first time in history, Zalari warships held formation. Razor-edged, bristling with spines, their hulls scarred but unbowed. Together, it wasn't an army. Not really. It was a funeral procession waiting for someone to name the corpse. Renner stood at his shoulder, voice raw. Sir, what if this is too big for us? Thorne didn't look at him. His voice was gravel. Then we die loud enough to remind the galaxy who the hell we were. The void cracked, not metaphorically. Literally. Space tore open, bleeding white fire, and out of it stepped shapes, not ships, not fleets, monuments that moved. Each ascended vessel was a city-sized structure, geometry bent into impossibility, towers folding in on themselves, surfaces shifting like liquid. They radiated heat without flame, gravity without mass. Looking at them too long made the eyes bleed. A whisper filled every channel, every brain. Submit. For a heartbeat, the fleet faltered. Even hardened Zalari crews hesitated, their spines rattling with primal terror. But then Thorne spoke into the comms, voice like a hammer. You declared war. Now we'll show you why that was a mistake. Billions heard it, and Earth's fleet surged forward. The first clash was chaos. Human railguns lit space with tungsten fire. Zalari plasma lances ripped across ascended hulls. Explosions bloomed like suns. But the Ascended didn't fight back conventionally. They absorbed. Shots that should have split ships in half sank into them like water into soil, and then they reflected it back, twisted, magnified. 3 Earth destroyers vanished in seconds. A Zalari cruiser bent in half, its crew screaming into open comms before silence swallowed them. But still, humanity fought, because surrender wasn't in the blood. And then he came. Hound. His silhouette tore free of the ascended lines like a wolf leaving the shadows. No pod, no ship. Just a man-shaped figure wrapped in black alloy and light, moving through vacuum-like atmosphere. Half human, half something else. The Ascended's mark burned across his chest. His eyes glowed white, his movements fluid, terrifying. The comms erupted. Revenant survivors screamed. Zalari warlords snarled. But Thorne only whispered one word. Son of a bitch. Hound drifted between the fleets, motionless for a moment. Then his voice filled every channel, not amplified, not mechanical, just there. I am not yours. I am not theirs. I am what you made me. Silence followed. Then, louder. Now watch me break you. And he moved. The battlefield turned into legend. Hound tore into the ascended constructs like a blade through rot. His fists crushed impossible metal. His body tanked energy that should have atomized him. Every strike he landed didn't just damage, it corrupted them back, twisting their geometry against itself. The fleets rallied, inspired. Humans and Zalari fought side by side, covering his path, giving him openings. For the first time, predator species stood shoulder to shoulder, and for the first time, the Ascended faltered. But gods don't bleed without cost. Hound screamed as the Ascended pushed back, his body warped, skin splitting, alloy grafts burning red, his neural AI overloaded with voices not his own. The Ascended tried to pull him back into their fold. "You are ours. You are evolution. You are the end of them." Thorn saw it. Felt it. He knew if they took Hound fully, the war was already lost. So he made the call. "Lock every railgun. Focus on the breach." Renner snapped toward him. "That's suicide. He's still—" Thorn cut him off. "If Hound falls to them, humanity's gone anyway." But Hound heard. He looked at the iron rain, at Thorn, and for a split second, his human side flickered through. Not words, just a nod. Permission. And then he roared, "Do it!" The order went through. Every gun fired. The battlefield exploded in light. Hound's body disappeared in the storm, swallowed, burned, obliterated with the Ascended constructs around him. The shockwave rippled across the void, tearing through the impossible geometry, unraveling Ascended vessels into fragments of broken light. One by one, the monuments collapsed. And then there was silence. The war was over. Not won. Not truly. But survived. The Ascended were gone. For now, the fleets drifted, battered, broken but alive. Humans and Zalari alike stared into the void where gods had fallen. And for the first time, they realized something terrifying. They could be killed. Weeks later, Earth buried its dead. Cities rebuilt. Ships refitted. Children were born under skies that weren't screaming. But Commander Thorn never celebrated. He stood at Titan's memorial wall, hand against the engraved names. Warren's name. Billions more. Renner approached quietly. "We made it." Thorn shook his head. "No, we delayed it." Renner frowned. "What about Hound?" Thorn's jaw tightened. "He's gone." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure. Because sometimes, late at night, on channels too quiet to trace, he still heard that voice. "I am not yours. I am not theirs. I am what you made me." The galaxy whispered now. Of humans who fought gods and lived, of Zalari who bent the knee to stand with them. Of a weapon born from vengeance that turned into salvation, and of a war that wasn't finished. Because somewhere, out in the black, the Ascended weren't dead. They were waiting, watching. And humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was the predator.